Maureen Osmond. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the Hudson City Schools, and part of my role is the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, which includes gifted learners. So tonight, I would like to introduce Mrs. Nairi Wilkerson. She is a 7th grade English Language Arts teacher, but she's also the gifted coordinator for the district. So she coordinates gifted services and also coordinates the professional development of our teachers in all of our schools. Works with especially teachers in grades 2 through 8, and then also high school, in making sure that we are providing the correct and meaningful professional development for our teachers so they can best serve your children. So Nairi's going to take us through really a high level, really what does gifted services look like in Hudson, and then hopefully have a chance to go through what we're trying to do with differentiation, what is different in the classroom for our students who are gifted learners, and then we will have an opportunity for question and answers. And then if you would like to ask a question, we're going to ask you to put them on note cards because we do try to create FAQs. And then we are recording it. This PowerPoint will be posted on the website by the end of the week. I'm sorry, it's up right now. But the video probably won't be up until the end of the week. So parents can go back and refer to it, so you can tell your friends who missed the meeting that they can at least go back and refer to this. And Mr. Michael Sedlak is our 4th and 5th grade principal at Eastwoods Elementary, and he is here to listen and maybe answer questions. So if anyone wants a note card, I'm going to ask Mr. Sedlak to grab his half of the room, and I'll do my half. So without further ado, Mrs. Wilkerson.
Good evening, everyone. Our agenda says that we'll be here an hour, but we probably won't be here that long. I want to be respectful of your time. So I'll just get right into it. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what it means to be gifted, what our service model looks like here in the district, and just a quick slide to talk about the social, emotional needs of gifted learners, after which, if you had any questions, when you jot them down, if you just hold your card up, we'll come by and take them up. So the Ohio Department of Education, if you ever want to check the ODE's website, if you Google Ohio Department of Education, they have a page that is devoted to gifted education. But here's their definition. A gifted student is one who performs or shows potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to others of their age, experience, and environment. So students can be identified as gifted in multiple areas. Superior cognitive learners are those who are gifted in what we call general intelligence. You might see the letters CSI or SAS. Those both mean the same thing. CSI stands for Cognitive Skills Index. SAS is standard age score, but that's just depending on which instrument is used, that's what they call it. So a student who has a cognitive score of 128 or higher is considered gifted in that area, or if they were tested in kindergarten or 1st grade, the score is 127. So in the specific content areas, any student who scores in the 95th percentile or higher is considered gifted. Creative thinking are students who have a cognitive score of 112 or higher, and then there's a checklist provided by the ODE if the students score within a certain range on that checklist. Those two things together identify them as creatively gifted. And then lastly, students can be identified as gifted in visual and performing arts. So every year we partner with the ESC of Summit County, and we ask the art teachers, the music teachers, even the classroom teachers have recommended students at times, and they complete a checklist, and if the students score within a certain range on that checklist, then they're invited to the Visual and Performance Arts Assessment Day, and during that time, they're assessed by experts in those areas. So we had a couple, not from Hudson, but from Summit County. We do have ones who are assessed in drama, but mostly we have art and music. So in Hudson, we test our students, we call them whole grade sweeps in grades 2, 4, and 6. And then we take parent and teacher recommendations on the off grades of 1 through 5 and 7. Any student who scores 124 or higher, then they are retested for another opportunity to identify in the area of superior cognitive, and then anyone who scores in the 94th percentile is retested for an opportunity to be identified in the content areas. We do not test in science or social studies, but we do it if a parent requests it. But for the whole grade levels, we do cognitive ability, reading, and math at grades 2, 4, and 6, and also creative thinking. Because when we do the superior cognitive, any student who scored a 112 or higher, then we give that creative thinking checklist to their teachers. So these are our gifted numbers for 2018-19, the number of students we have who are gifted in each area at the elementary levels. Last year we had a review of our gifted service plan, and our committee consisted of Doreen, myself, teachers, counselors, and parents. We do have a copy of this for you all. And as a result of our review, we went to a 3-tier service model. Prior to last year, we serviced students with a cognitive score of 135 and higher through language arts with a gifted intervention specialist in grades 3 through 8. So now we have a 3-tiered model. Tier 1 are the students who you would think of who were serviced last before the change in the model, but there have been some changes in the scores. So any student who has a superior cognitive score of 137 or higher, or between 132 and 136 with a reading ID, they're pulled with a gifted intervention specialist. So at McDowell and Eastwoods, while language arts is going on in the classroom, those students are pulled to go with Mrs. Armbruster or Ms. Komar for their English language arts. So it's at the same time that language arts is taught in their homeroom classes. Tiers 2 and 3 are what's new to our model this year. And these students are clustered together. Cluster grouping is not a pull-out service. Cluster grouping happens within the classroom. And the teachers who have these clusters of students are receiving ongoing professional development. This year, our teachers did a minimum of 30. The majority of them had twice as many hours as that between in-district professional development and opportunities at the ESC. So tier 2 are our students who are also identified as superior cognitive, but do not meet the qualifications for a tier 1 pullout. And then tier 3 students are students who are identified in reading and or math, but do not have a superior cognitive ID. So the purpose of a cluster group is so that students with like abilities are placed together in the same room purposefully so that the teachers can plan instruction for them. So if you can imagine if I had a classroom full of me, because I'm just an on-level kid, and then Doreen is reading Harry Potter, but she's 8, it's going to be pretty difficult to plan for Doreen alone. But if there's a group of Doreens, then it's much easier to plan meaningful instruction, and it's going to be a much more meaningful learning experience for Doreen. So what it doesn't mean is that students in tier 2 or 3 will be doing something different all the time. You know, I had some parents who were concerned this year and said she didn't do anything differently today. And sometimes it's not appropriate for them to be doing something different. For instance, if it is an introductory lesson, you know, we use the workshop model where the teacher will present to everyone, and then where the differentiation happens is when they break out into their smaller groups. And we'll look later at what that might look like in the classroom. Sometimes kids who are not gifted may be with the kids who are, Sometimes the kids who are not gifted, who are gifted, aren't working in that cluster. It just depends on what the child needs that day. So I might be gifted in math, but I struggle with fractions. So I may not be with my cluster during fraction lessons because I need something different at that time. The other change that we made to our service model is that we no longer identify first graders. They are tested, they're screened. The test, the COGAT has 9 sections, so they actually take one part of each of so they take 3 sections, one from each of the 3 subgroups. That's called a screener. And they're still clustered together as second graders, but they do still have to identify for services with the second grade, whole grade suite that they'll take in. Every student who is identified as gifted is put on what is called a written education plan. And the written education plan has a goal on it. And for those of you who are new and your child is newly identified, you'll get a copy of the written education plan sometime before conferences to give you the opportunity to look it over. And then when you come in for conferences, your child's teachers will ask you to sign it. So the web asks the question, how is this goal different from what every child will do? It looks like this. I don't expect you to be able to see it, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what it looks like. So it's a 3-page document. The first page is more just demographical information about your child, the areas that they're identified in, their learning styles, and where they are academically and social emotionally. The second page is what's called the goal sheet. For every area that your child is identified in, he or she will have a goal sheet. So if they're identified in reading and math, there'll be 2 different goal sheets because they'll have a different goal for reading than math. So your child's teacher will lay out what kinds of differentiated strategies they're using for your child and how the service is being provided. And then the last sheet is just for you to sign. Here's an example of some goals that you might see on a written education plan. A student in math might be asked to demonstrate an advanced understanding of concepts and an ability to apply multiple strategies to solve problems and answer questions. So it's not something specific like learn this many things in this much time. That's not what a web goal is for. It's a broad statement about what a student should be able to do and the way the teacher should be instructing them. The goal on the bottom is the goal that I have for my students at 7th grade to be able to identify and explain thematic and abstract elements in literature selections and demonstrate the same within written work. That's actually the superior cognitive goal for all of the kids in grades 3 through 8. So in the classroom, we are looking to improve depth of knowledge. So I apologize, that's a lot of text, but I want to read it to you because you'll be able to relate to it. Consider how sending a rocket to the moon and raising a child are both considered difficult, but for different reasons. When you send a rocket to the moon, you have to follow a long list of detailed procedures. If you follow them carefully, you can reliably repeat that procedure with a high probability of success. There is no such thing for parenting. Even if you expertly raised one child and wrote down everything you did, following that same set of procedures carefully for the next child does not ensure a high probability of success. There are so many interwoven factors with raising a child that no set of instructions can guarantee success. Accordingly, sending a rocket to the moon is a complicated process, whereas raising a child is complex. So what we're looking for is not to give them 4x3 multiplication because you can do 3x2 multiplication. That would be considered complicated. What we're trying to do is increase their ability to think more deeply about what they're doing. What we found, we've had some testimony from teachers here at the high school. When they rush through, they have trouble once they get here to the high school with the higher level math and particularly transferring that information to the sciences. So what we want to do is make sure that they can think think about the problems that are presented to them that are complex and not necessarily complicated. So I'm not going to read this to you, but we are looking for them to refine skills and apply them at a higher plane of sophistication. Ask them to do things that are more abstract, more open-ended, and more multifaceted. We hear a lot, I know the answer, but I don't know why. Well, we would argue that you don't know the answer if you don't know why. That's kind of like, I took French in grades 4 through 10, so if you give me the book, I could probably still say the words, but that's as far as it's gonna go for me. One of the math teachers cringed when I used the term foil. Front, outside, inside, last. You remember when you did that? Did you actually know that's dealing with berets? I had no idea. No clue. But that's because I didn't learn why. I learned how. And I didn't do well in physics either, for the record. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to get them to make sure that they have that solid foundation for our higher levels of math and science. So Doreen also has this slide just to give you examples of what we're talking about when we're talking about depth of knowledge. Strategic and extended thinking is what we are focusing on with the kids. So it's not necessarily that they'll have a different math problem or a different book to read, but it's what they're being asked to do with them. So this is on the back of that paper she's passing out to you. And if we're talking about depth of knowledge, are the students just recalling something that they've learned? Then that's not where we want to go with any of our kids really, but particularly our gifted kids. We want them to be doing something new and investigating something in a different way than what they're used to doing. A lot of them know the steps of the problem, but they become a little uncomfortable when we ask them to show us something different. So strategic thinking, which is level 3, requires reasoning, planning, and using evidence at a higher level of thinking than just to recall something or just to use a skill. Explaining their thinking and making conjectures will be considered level 3 activity. Asking questions that could have more than one answer, and that's what we're getting. If you've ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy, when we're getting into higher order thinking, when we're asking them to evaluate and synthesize and to defend their answers. The kids love to argue. Allow them to defend their answers. Oh, they love that. And it doesn't mean that either one of them is necessarily wrong or right. But if you have evidence to support your answer, then you're getting into level 3 thinking. So this, I don't even understand it. Christina would have to explain this to you, but this is something that some of our 3rd graders did this year. Instead of using a base 10 math system, they were asked to do the same math problems but using a base 5 system. I have no idea how this works because I teach English, but some of our 3rd graders actually are able to use a base 5 system, transfer what they know about math and into a base 5 system, and I want to say they use the base 4 system as well.
It demonstrates that they have a strong sense of number and what number means, so they're able to manipulate that and move from if you think you counted 10 from the decades, then shifting that thinking that you're now that unit of 10 is a unit of 5. And so if you have, we're watching students solve these problems in 3rd grade, and they're able to talk to their peers in maybe a small group and with the teacher's assistance and say, why am I able to do that? And because they have such a strong sense of number sense, they're able to start to manipulate numbers. We're stating this, it's really an algebra 2. If you follow the standard, it's an algebra 2 standard. So we're not saying the kids are in algebra 2. They're not ready for algebra 2. They're ready though when they have that strong sense and they own their number sense to think differently. So we're challenging them to think differently.
So for language arts, A student may be asked to compare and analyze multiple works from the same time period and from the same genre. So that might require them to do some research in addition to the reading that they're doing. Here's one that we love a lot. Demonstrating ways to do a math problem without using the standard algorithm. Sometimes an algorithm is not the most efficient way to solve a problem. But a lot of them are married to it because that's what they know how to do. But being asked to think differently, think more deeply about what the numbers mean and how they work together, those are some of the things that they're being asked to do in their math classes. Good teaching for gifted learners happens at a higher degree of difficulty than for many students their age. And so those are the things that we're working on in our PD sessions. Our math teachers spent a lot of time adding enrichment activities to the math curriculum to help with a higher degree of difficulty. And since we're on math, I wanted to also point out that a student who is gifted in math is not necessarily going to be accelerated in math, nor is a student who is not gifted necessarily not going to be accelerated. Acceleration deals with compacting or skipping content. And just because a student has been identified in the 95th percentile or higher, that's not evidence that they haven't demonstrated through that identification that they're able to do the higher level math. So there are other tests that they take at 5th grade and other grades to identify whether or not they're ready to be accelerated in math.
So that 95th percentile is a gift. This is something that's really important, especially if you're a 4th or 5th grade parent, because we do look at that whole grade acceleration in mathematics. We screen all of our 5th graders. 95th percentile on that Terra Nova means that your child's performing in the 95th percentile better than their other 5th grade peers. They're not hanging in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade math. They are performing with their peers. They are other kids that age in grade 5 that have been exposed to that content. So that's something that is really important as a parent. It's confusing. I mean, it's really, really confusing.
So the test that we offer is testing some of the 6th grade content. So we're seeing if they're ready to skip. Because it's called Honors 6, it seems like it just makes sense. If my kid's gifted, it should be in an honors course. But it's really a 7th grade math class.
And they're taking the 7th grade state end-of-year test. So, and it's really compacting 7th and some of 8th. And then 7th grade, they're going to algebra with high school credit.
And along those same lines, I get a lot of calls for my child is identified as gifted in reading. Why aren't they coming into enriched language arts? And the same holds true. In enriched language arts, we aren't serving gifted readers. We're serving the cognitively gifted through language arts. Any student who is cognitively gifted can technically be serviced in any content area. But we choose language arts because it is also the subject we feel can most address, where we can best address social emotional needs through literature and through writing. But technically, they could be serviced through science if that's how we chose to service them. Districts are required to identify gifted learners, but it's up to each district to decide how they're going to service them. So there are districts who may service through something like science or math, but we just choose language arts for our superior cognitive learners. And our CSI is comparable to our neighboring districts. And we did some research on our neighboring districts and what some of the research is about the cognitive cutoffs where a student may potentially need something different than their peers. So when we start talking about the social emotional needs of gifted learners, this is just one slide, but I could talk to you all day about this because you're going to nod your head a lot to this part. Beware that strengths and potential problems can be flip sides of the same coin. So a 5th grader who can read on a 12th grade level, it may be hard to find things that are content appropriate, but at their level. So if we all could just get together and write a book set, then we can all probably retire, right? So just be mindful of their frustrations sometimes with some of the things that they may want to read that may not be appropriate for them. Gifted students' physical, emotional, social, and intellectual growth is often uneven. We call that asynchronous learners. So I might read on the 9th grade level, I can do high school math, but for the life of me, I cannot ride my bike. I mean, they're all over the place, and that can be very frustrating for them. Sometimes they understand things that they aren't supposed to understand, and you think you're having a conversation that's over their head, but they understand, but then they go back and they say it to someone else, and it wasn't appropriate to say it to a 5th grader. Don't see that. So, but that confuses them because they understood it, and so those are just some of the things that often come with gifted learners that's frustrating for them and for us as their parents. When too much is placed on the title of gifted, I never, in my classroom, we never talk about gifted, we never use the word gifted. They have needs, just like kids on the other end of the bell curve have needs. We're meeting their needs, and that's the way that I approach it. Because when too much is placed on the title of gifted, it puts a lot of pressure on them because they equate that to being perfect. So I must not be smart if I can't learn my facts. I must not be what they say I am if I'm unable to do this thing as quickly as I did this last thing. So I would encourage you to downplay the gifted label. It's more about us being sure that we give them what they need. And that kind of goes with number 4. And as they get older, we will I find it a lot at the middle school, they don't want to take as many risks in fear of not being perfect or disappointing for my grade or any multiple number of reasons. And so it's all about doing their best, and I know those are the same conversations that you have with them. I seldom have a student whose grades don't match their effort, and that's what I tell them. So yes, you might get a 2 on a rubric. It's not the end of the world. That means you have some learning and some growing to do, and that's why we come to school every day. So just some things for you to keep in mind. I would highly recommend that you go to the Ohio Association for Gifted Kids. It's oagc.com. And there is a handbook that you can download, and it's called What to Expect When You're Parenting a Gifted Child. They also have a gifted division. If you join the gifted division, you'll get different emails and access to different reading materials related to gifted children.
They also have a lot of resources, like summer camps and experiences too on OAGC and then the national organization also. That's where we refer parents sometimes when they're looking for something very specific or different. Great resources. It's worth, I think, $10 a year.
So there's my email and my phone number. I do teach in the mornings, so email is better, but I do my very best to get back to voicemail within 24 hours, but I can't check my email in my classroom, or I can't check my voicemail, but those are ways to reach me. If you have any questions after you have had a chance to think it over again, this slideshow is up on the site, and then the video will be up in the next couple of days if you have any follow-up questions.
I actually want to add something. Today I had the opportunity to attend kind of a book talk or a luncheon with Ted Dintersmith. He is considered a thought leader in education. He was the producer of a documentary, Most Likely to Succeed. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it. It has been honored at Sundance and Tribeca and I think another award. And he recently published a book, What Schools Could Be. And he was talking about one of the things that he showed us, really some futuristic thinking. But one video he showed that is on YouTube, and I would have thought about it. It was just today I got back into from Cleveland around 2. It is asking MIT students, can they light a light bulb with a wire and a battery? And so these MIT students, one of the best universities in our country, engineering, science, they said yes. The answer is no. And so the point really was, we want to graduate, we want to raise, we want to teach, we want to grow thinkers. We don't want to grow
somebody that just wants the right answer. So that is sometimes very frustrating for the gifted mind. And it's really a mind shift. And listening to our community and listening to our business leaders and our Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, they're looking for that creativity and innovation. Yes, you still need the basic skills, but beyond that, our children need to learn how to make mistakes. And that's where you really learn, is by making those mistakes and creating hands-on, creative ways that also impact our community. So things like, I know some of your children may be involved in the Bloodhound Project, and Embrace Day is tomorrow, which is an exact opportunity. Lemonade Day, connecting to the community, passion projects. Those are the kinds of things that when children are learning and they 3D print something and it looks like a blob, and they didn't plan it to look like a blob on 3D Blocks CAD, that's that perseverance and being able to learn. So I really want to, and I'm challenging myself. I am a parent. I'm a parent of a student that has a learning disability. I'm a parent of a gifted learner, and I'm a parent of a 22-year-old that is looking for a job. It's really frustrating. I think I need more perseverance. Otherwise, I'm going to kill him. Anyways, it's going to be great. I love him. It's a gift to have him home. Yeah, it is. Anyways, but we have to love our kids. And that's our job as parents. And that's our job as teachers and as educators. First and foremost, we have to accept them for who they are. And then we have to create this learning environment that isn't just about the right answer. It's not just about breezing through and rushing through our math program. It's about pausing and learning and making mistakes. And that's something that we have to remind ourselves. I have to remind myself that as a parent too, even when I teach with my 22-year-old. But that's really something that we just have to remember. And I want to, the social emotional piece is something that we work with our teachers. That is the first thing in our professional development. It is not the last thing. It is the first thing that we address and we talk about and we read articles. In every PD, it is the first thing because we have to take care of the child. That is our first and foremost mission. And we have to do it in creative ways. We don't have all the answers either. In our programming, we have evolved and we're trying to meet the needs of all our learners. It's not perfect either. But we will continue to learn and grow and take feedback. So I'm really appreciative that you're here tonight. And if you want to look up, if you want to see Most Likely to Succeed, we did offer a viewing a couple years ago for our Hudson community, but even look it up and do look at some of the trailers and the book, What Schools Could Be, Ted Dintersmith, awesome. And so we can take questions. If you can write them down, we can, for FAQ, does anyone have any questions? The question is, would students in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 cluster grouping be in a specific homeroom? Yes. So, yes, they're clustered together, depending on their needs, and then we want them to be with friends also, so that they are clustered together. They're intentionally clustered.
The question is, can you explain more about the pull-out program? Is it every day? For how long? Does it start day one of school? How do they go somewhere else? Do they go somewhere else? Or does it all take place at school? So, yes, for the pull-out program, it's every day. It's the language arts block. Is it 2 hours?
It matches the...
However long language arts is in grades 3, 4, and 5, and then at the middle school, the length of the English class, that's how long the pull-out service is. So it's every day. It does start on the first day of school. Mrs. Armbruster is the 3rd and 4th grade pull-out teacher. Ms. Komar is 5th grade. Mrs. Luck is the 6th and 8th for English, and you'll have to suffer with me for 7th. They are going into 7th grade. Do I tell my child he is in the program? And does this designation carry through non-testing years? So once a student is identified, they are always identified. So if your child, the next time their tested scores below the tier of service that they're in, their tier will not change. They can only increase service. It won't go down. Do I tell my child that he is in the program? I think it depends on who your child is. For me, I wouldn't tell my child because it doesn't make any difference. If he were being pulled out, I would explain, because sometimes that will bring them some anxiety, and let them know that they're with a group of students who are going to be pulled. First of all, because it'll make them feel better that they're not going to be the only one leaving their room and leaving their friends, and it's only for a little while. I would concentrate more on the logistics, that you're going to be pulled out and you're going to have your language arts with another teacher, because that's what you need. Because even before I test the kids, I give them the whole speech about how you can't fail the test. It gives us a number that helps us to know the best place to put you for the type of learner that you are. So if it were my child, especially if it were a tier 2 or 3 cluster, I wouldn't, because it doesn't make any difference. But for a tier 1, I would probably explain the logistics of it just to make sure that there's no anxiety related.
For a 7th grader, newly identified, will he change communities to be in reach?
No. They're all pulled off of community just for language arts. So in each of my English classes, I have kids from all 3 communities. It gets weird, but they all figure it out. So they go back to their own communities for the rest of their classes, and they just come to me for language arts.
Is there a WEP for middle schoolers in honors math?
Okay, so this is where it gets complicated. They don't have a WEP, they have a WAP, a written acceleration plan, which is different. Oh my goodness. So we WEP and WAP, we have all these issues with WEP and WAP. So they're on a written acceleration plan, which it serves the same purpose. It outlines specifically their math track and what math classes they're going to take. That's more the purpose of the WAP. Not the WEP, the WAP, so that we can outline, and if the student has some struggles in the advanced class, what we do to meet them. We don't just boot them out and say, go back to the regular room. We do have intervention plans in place for them. We reconvene as a team, and that document will also require your signature if your child is going into Honor 6.
Is gifted suggested for all students with very high CSI scores, 139 to 141? Yes, that's how we service gifted in Hudson. Not all school districts service like that.
I think I answered the question.
Our tier 1 students cluster in classrooms with tier 2 and 3 students. Tier 3, yes. Tier 2, no. So our tier 1 students, the ones who are pulled out for language arts, there will be some other gifted math students in the room with them, but the tier 2 students are in different clusters. The tier 1 students are clustered together in 2 or 3 classrooms. It just depends on how many we have. So there are, I think, 2 clusters at 3rd grade. And I don't know how many, but there are 3 or 4 at 4th and 5th grade. And they absolutely do not give up their recess to receive services. They don't give up their specials. That's important. My son would say, I'm out if he has to give up his recess. So they don't give up recess, specials, anything like that. It's only during the same instructional time that everything else takes place.
Can a newly identified gifted student in math in 6th grade test into double accelerated math in 7th? This is complicated also, I don't into this one. It is highly unlikely, but we want to do what students need. We want to program for what they need. So it is really highly unlikely, but we've had a few students, I'm never going to say no, What happens really is that the teacher or the parent and will convene a team, and then we'll get to see what they need. And we'll do further assessment, because when you're double accelerating, you're skipping out of something. We typically will not skip out of Algebra 1. It is a gateway to higher math. It is a foundational skill. Students are moving from the concrete to the abstract. We will rarely, I can't remember double accelerating out of algebra. Our high school teachers are saying absolutely not. Your brain grows at a certain rate, and there's certain times in adolescence is one of them that you can understand those abstract and what does that mean, and be able to manipulate it now in the abstract. So that is highly, highly, highly unlikely. But of course, next year I'll be proven wrong. But it is doubtful.
Does the Tier 1 pullout address both language arts and math? That's a great question. Only language arts, although the Tier 1 cluster rooms also have the Tier 3 math cluster in it. I hope I didn't lose you just now. But their homeroom teacher is the one who is receiving the professional development to address their math. So sometimes Mrs. Armbruster, if she has some time, she'll do some math enrichment activities, but that doesn't count towards that's just extra enrichment that she does for them, but their math instruction takes place in their regular classroom. So if you have a Tier 1 pullout student who is also identified in math, their math cluster is in their homeroom classes.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Questions around it. Is there any plan to get pull-out math services?
Not at this time.
You talked about it a couple years ago, changing the...
Right. We address that through acceleration. Students that are really operating in higher, consistently in higher level math. We
Before
have
sixth
students.
grade.
What?
Before 6th grade,
Yes, we have kindergarten and first graders accelerated.
accelerated in math because they were identified.
Depending, not because they were identified, they are truly gifted in math. So it just depends on what the student needs. So we're addressing before K through 5. It is very rare that we're accelerating the lower grades because they're still learning. In first grade, when I was a first grade teacher, I had readers coming in, and then by second or third grade, they were leveling out with their other peers. It just depends what that preschool before they came into kindergarten, that experience was like.
What's the identification on that? In the K1 to grade levels?
It just depends on the student need, and it is very rare that we are accelerating in math in the lower grades. But we do. 4th, 5th grade with middle schoolers coming to the high school. It just depends on what that student needs, and we see it pretty early on. It's a handful of students across the.
So it's not with a CSI score?
It has nothing to do with their CSI score.
Okay.
They're truly kids that are truly gifted in mathematics, and they show different characteristics. But there's really no plan. We're addressing our differentiation, really math and through the clusters and through professional development. So.
Since gifted students may be taught the same content but asked to go deeper than non-gifted students, will they take the same tests and quizzes or be given separate tests? I'm not sure that's a classroom teacher decision, but it depends. If they're still addressing the same content standard, they may have tested out during a pre-test, and when the rest of the class is tested, they may not test at all. It just depends. So for my students, personally, if I gave you a pre-test and then you did some deeper things, you already proved you know it, you wouldn't be taking that test. Because the test is a content area standards test, then my students wouldn't take that test. So it depends on the teacher. Sometimes they do want to have a second look to make sure that they know it, but I think that's something that you would probably want to address with your child's teachers. Is it possible for parents to decline acceleration, especially when the child is socially behind? Yes. Anytime we've had parents who, we call it opting out of service. So be that a Tier 1 opt-out or an acceleration, you can't do that. Now, if they're in Tier 2 or 3, it won't change anything. They're still in the same homeroom. They're still differentiated. So this is really referring to tier 1 pullouts. We do have students who qualify for services who are not receiving them for just these reasons. Their parents feel like they have some other things socially and emotionally that they need to address. So the answer is yes. However, if your child is accelerated in math, past what we call the well, after a certain period, they're no longer considered accelerated, they're considered on level. So if your child is in honors 6 and they're going into algebra the next year, once they get into algebra, they're considered in on-level math. It's on level for them.
What is available besides clusters for gifted math in 7th grade? So there really aren't gifted clusters in mathematics in 7th grade. We have our honors math program, which is really accelerating, and then our teachers are differentiating within the content. So again, there's that workshop model, there's that mini lesson, whatever the content is, decimals, fractions, probability, statistics, then what the students are doing is differentiated, is different. So whether it's on level, a little bit above, or below level.
Will a tier 2 student have the opportunity to be reevaluated for inclusion in tier 1 in subsequent years? Yes. So grades 2, 4, and 6, and parent and teacher recommendation off years 1, 3, 5, and 7.
So every 24 months, approximately.
What are the methods used to assess the goals and objectives, strategies and goals, measures and metrics? I'm assuming in the web, or the web.
They're kind of fun words.
I think the question is, how do we assess that the students are meeting the goal of the web? I believe that's the question. It's the same way with rubrics and quizzes and tests. It's just broadly worded so that I don't have to say things like he's going to learn this many vocabulary words, because it's not that type of a thing. So if I'm looking for more abstract thinking and writing, that would be reflected in a rubric the same way any other skill is. So our web goals are assessed through the classroom assessments in the same way that any of the other standards are.
Do you have any other questions?
Please feel free to contact your child's teacher. They are the most expert on your child. So those classroom questions are best addressed with the teacher, but you can absolutely call the principal or Nairi or myself, and we can talk through all of these, any other questions that may arise. But you know your student, you know your child the best, and trust in that, and I love them very dearly. And we're excited, and we take you sending your children here to Hudson to get really seriously. And we're passionate about providing the best education and educational experiences that we can. So thank you very much. I'm actually heading to another meeting across the hall.